see what some of my data is showing. I did do some uh, digging into Parsec, and there was some interesting bits that I was seeing there. Kind of, a lot of um, bottoming out in a few key projects that could signify maybe a bit of a bounce. It's really hard to call a bottom. You're looking for it to hold some support, and there's some risk factors that sit in there. For instance, apes rallied and then Hanwei dumped 50 apes, and that was enough to send them back down a bit. I was just listening to Coffee with Captain here, and apparently he's got another 1,000 more to go. If that's the case, that's a lot of scare because he could dump those at any given time. But let's take a
I
look.
was actually gonna ask just while we're on the subject before you get into
Yeah,
it. Are you tracking metrics around um, can you track like overall profiles in terms of the underlying leverage and loans within a collection?
I'm not, although they are metrics that I have wanted to dig into. There's a few different ones that I want to populate. I have done some of that work in the past on Flipside. Of course, I have transferred to Dune, but I would like to look at, for instance, one metric I think is kind of a more calming metric in a lot of ways is, you know, looking at say a 90-day window or a 6 month window, and what percentage of NFTs have traded in a collection. Most of the time, it's a very small percentage that are actively trading. But you're right. There's some other metrics that would be interesting to look into. I think the WETH accumulation NFTs is a pretty vital one. So more specifically, I think on Blur. So, what percentage of NFTs have been accumulated by bids, and then also looking at it in the terms of some of the larger uh, players with that, because all it takes is a handful of those WETH accumulations to get dumped at once into five people that don't actually want to hold them, and now they're forced to resell, and then it's a kind of this floor push downwards. So really good metrics to bring up. I got to think of a way to do it in a way that makes it clear and concise, right? Because there's so much data, and I could add it into like my collection view, but then it just becomes almost too much on this page. So finding a way to maybe get these to stand out a little bit better, and add some of that in there. I guess I could add those columns in, but I would like to do some digging in there. So those are really good points to bring up, and I think there would be some good value in there.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for your answer. Yeah, I totally agree. Adding too much visual clutter takes away
Mm-hmm.
from the whole thing. But
Exactly.
at least with the Blur, the collections that are still on Blur, it seems like that WETH ownership percentage and the loans, underwater loans, are pretty key metrics for determining future price action.
Yep. 100%. And it's in a lot of ways it's kind of like the heat map that you see in crypto, where people are kind of leveraged long, and as that builds up, that's where you kind of see this kind of cascading event where people squeeze out some of those and force out some um, longs or shorts in that activity when things get a little frothy on the market. So when you're looking at loans being in that situation, or you're looking at maybe a little bit too much WETH accumulation, really important. And it may be even worthwhile to also kind of look at some of the um, behavior of that. I know Cyrus does some really good work on everything when it comes to Blur and Blur bids, but I think more could be done in a way to kind of up a dashboard and visualize it a bit. So you're not just looking for tweets or that information, but to actually be able to go and look at it. There's some value to that. So. Hmm. So yeah, I mean, uh, obviously what I cover a lot is ETH NFTs. Um, Interesting one here today was the Whiff dog sale for $4.3 million. So this is the original picture on the dog with hat that just sold for a load of ETH. But that also shows up here on my data feed, foundation sale, and that portion of it makes up a large percentage of what the sales are today. But ETH volume has been down here the past few days. There has been a bit of a shift in focus into meme coins across the board, and a lot of degeneracy, kind of getting a little um, uh, I don't know. I won't say toppy. I don't think it's toppy, but just a little more risky with everyone just kind of sending Solana to random addresses, and you know the occasional rug and occasional things going a little crazy there. So, definitely not the meta I think anyone really wants to be in, but it has resulted in some massive returns for those that have been lucky to the right situation. A couple interesting bits here. Seeing some spikes in um, the buyer to seller ratio. Good to see. I think maybe a indication that we've kind of. I mean, I can't even say it. Like I might have bottomed out a little bit in the short term here for ETH, but I think we're looking at getting through this meme cycle before we really get a focus of attention back in general, right? But you know, with some of these large gains, some of that liquidity is inevitably has a good chance to funnel down into ETH and NFTs and things like that as well. Buyer sellers overall trending downward in terms of volume of unique traders on a daily basis. So that's happening. Magic Eden hitting about 5-6% of the market, so fairly low. OpenSea still has 46% in terms of daily buyers, and in terms of volume itself, OpenSea an 18%, Magic Eden as high as 9%. So in there, but still a lot of it is Blur. A lot of the Blur activity is still just farming. Um, and then the index here kind of neared back to where we were 6 months ago. So September levels in the terms of ETH prices for NFTs on the blue chip index. I think buoyed up more and so by punks and some success. Obviously, apes are really kind of like a basically an all time low, but back to where they were pre August 2021 when or July August 2021 when they kind of had their first run. Uh, Up in terms of ETH value, so that's still good to see. However, it's kind of counterproductive when everything else is really moving on crypto, and it's a bit more challenging. So if you're NFT heavy, that's a part that makes it a little bit more difficult. Um, Over the last bit, not a single project on ETH is up blue chip wise over the last week, and not a single project is up over the last 30 days in ETH terms. Creeps is the closest over 30 days. Captain's also closer, but most projects in the minus 30 to 50%. So, we've got to look at are we oversold in any case? Is there a potential bottom or opportunity? Of course, with ETH and Bitcoin retracing and crypto kind of broadly retracing, there could become a sweet spot for an opportunity to accumulate. Of course, many were probably well accumulated as it was, but there is going to be a brief opportunity, I think, where if ETH is low and floor prices are low, like there's some collections out there that look pretty attractive overall, in the strength and belief of NFTs overall. Mid cap is still up 14% in terms of ETH value and up 240% in terms of ETH value. And we do have some collections that are up over the last week. We got our cat gang through another ownership transition. They seem to have been transitioned to some concealed identity crypto criminal overload. It's funny. I say that because I just see the picture of the new owner, and they're like completely masked up and you can't see who they are. They're from somewhere in the tropics. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Parallel avatars up So we are seeing some small gains here on the mid cap, and then also seeing it on the 30 day as well. Of course, got a cat gain as in there, but just from that kind of spike from where they had been over the last 30, but a few winners, which is fun to see. And then if we look at Blur here, short term, we're kind of mixed on the day. It was a little bit more green earlier in the day. I tend to favorite collections that I think are established, so that way it's a little bit easier to scroll through and see how the market is looking broadly through Blur. Um, but there's some prices here that are um, almost across the board in terms of ETH value. Most collections are at um, a recent low or a long-term low, which, like I said, could be an interesting opportunity based on your conviction in ETH NFTs in general, right? So, I think there's a bit of a degree of where we've gone through this cycle of the ETH NFT bull market bubble, so to speak. We retraced significantly. Then we had this kind of trailing run up, and then we've kind of gone back down again, right? So almost a bit of a you know bull trap, dead cat bounce kind of aspect to ETH NFTs in terms of ETH value. Like I said, in terms of their price in USD, they're up in a lot of cases, but you know it's hard to say we're up when we see apes at 13.6 ETH, which is wild. Mutants at 2.34, and that is actually up from their recent lows in the basically the 2 ETH range. Kind of a nice little bit of a almost double bottom here on mutants, and then we've pushed up a bit more. I know there is some risk in mutants as well for some uh, farming whale holders ownership, so you got to watch for that. But the general aspect of them kind of pulling out of here, they were kind of a little harder collection to evaluate on Parsec, and I'll dig into Parsec here in a bit. But they were a tough one because they really are at recent lows there. So, but I'm gonna pause for if there is any questions, thoughts, etc., and go from there. Again, you can put any questions into Club VC chat as well, and then I can look at it there. But what I do like to go here is take a little bit of a look in the overall market by looking at a few key collections. I think apes are still the fundamental collection to look at for general sentiment towards ETH NFTs. And we did talk about this last week where there was kind of this long-term trend that we're looking for something of a range here in this kind of 13 ETH mark. And this goes way back on the weekly chart, back to kind of the first pullback and support on apes as they ran up. So we held that range. We've held it here again, and we've done a little bit of bounce up. So this could possibly mark a bit of a bottom, but still got to see more on this, right? I think we want to move over some of these um, uh, longer term moving averages, and if we can break maybe above this 14.5 range, I think that's really where we start to see some strength in apes and potentially across the market. We can see that we are oversold in general, and it looks like we could be approaching a bit of a MACD switch. So there is some positivity in the chart here, but it still has to play out, right? So it's probably going to be a couple few days here where we see where things move on apes. Pudgies, similar scenario here where we're looking at kind of a bounce off a kind of support. I got the support line drawn in at off this 9 ETH mark. But there is also this kind of downtrend line here that it's up against. So, Pudgies could move down here more over the next couple of days, but if it can get up above this support line in this 10 ETH range over the next uh, day here, then we could see a bit of a positive move in Pudgies as well. So that's also good to see. So kind of seeing a bit of a trend here where there's some longer term correlations happening across the collections. All of them kind of in this bottoming range. So I'm excited to see some of that, and obviously watching forward over the next couple days how that plays out, because nothing here is uh, in a callable state, right? Because you're fighting this downtrend, which we've been in really back since January overall. And, so we finished pretty strong through November, December. January is all pretty good, and then we've been trailing down, and then this steep decline over uh, March, end of uh, February, and now again seeing a bit of a change here on what's going on with Azuki in this long-term support, dating back to the elemental um, kerfuffle and decline. So elementals here, and then it kind of bounced back, and then found its consolidation right around this 3.6 ETH range, and we're in this same range here again. So wanting to see a bounce above some of the longer term moving averages here, and get a move up. So again, another kind of correlated trend that I think is kind of interesting and positive. What other collections can we look at? Punks, not a lot of movement typically in punks. Of course, we are um, getting. Oh, that doesn't even look right. Of course, punks doesn't trade as often, so they're a little harder. Might be better to look at the weekly. So we get better movement there. This 50 ETH mark is always been a pretty key level over the last just about year, and we're just in that range right now. So it's at a bit of a key bounce level, and it needs to move probably above 52 ETH for a bit of positive trend. But it's a similar across the collections there. So um, all really quite interesting. Let's see. There's another good example here. Ladies, they had their treasury kind of hacked, so they're gonna look a bit different. Captains has had some success here, so I'm curious to see where that is at. Um, mm, there are other collections you want me to look at. We can bring it up. I will tap into ordinals and Solana a bit as well. Tell you my painful story on ordinals, um, and we'll look at that too. So captains is back to January low, so kind of a nice little support level here at 3.8. So another collection that could be in this kind of bounce position here. So makes it really another interesting data point across the board. So a lot of collections at these kind of key levels. Um, so the next couple of days, I think, are going to be really interesting for ETH NFTs. Um, And so watch for that. I think we're going to get maybe a bit of a move, and it might correlate really well with the dip in ETH price, providing nothing dramatic happens in this price activity here. So Bitcoin has come back. It is ranging a bit on this moving average range here of the 100-day EMA, and they're kind of finding a bit of support there. ETH as well, kind of in a bit more of a range, um, kind of in a bit of nowhere range, bit of support resistance in between the 200 and 100. So it's a little harder to to tap where ETH is going to be. I think you could say that there's support right at the 34.70 range. So that could be what is there. So we'll watch what ETH is doing, but this pullback makes for some opportunity in crypto, and we've seen that a little bit in ordinals with the pullback, and then of course with some of the other elements that were going on. ETH, same idea. A bit of a pullback where it's less attractive now to hold ETH itself, and then becomes more attractive to try and leverage up on the other cryptos. Of course, most of that is just flowing directly into meme tokens across the board. But if meme tokens as well, if they're slowing down or whatnot, then some of that attention could cycle right into NFTs. So yeah, the next couple days really interesting there. Let's see if there's any other collections that are interesting to look at here. Zappies isn't really in any particular spot, in a bit of a kind of a support resistance range right now. Could move further down, um, but they are in this short term upward trend. So it is, um, yeah, interesting one to watch. Doesn't really tell us a lot more in terms of overall market. Did not mean to click into Moonbirds. Not a lot there to look at. As it's, I mean, just looking straight down overall, and I don't know where we'll find a bottom in Moonbirds. Half ETH maybe, which is wild. I'm sorry. And Kenpai Pandas, one of the more successful runners here lately. Bit of consolidation here, which is I think good overall. Bit of a pullback from their recent run. Some support here right at this kind of two and a quarter range, and looking to find some additional support. So yeah, Kenpai Pandas I think are not too bad, but I mean a lot of those other large important collections I think are more interesting to watch here overall. So that's where I'm gonna have my attention, is watching the main movers, Azuki, Apes, Mutants, Punks to a degree, Captains. I think all overall tell us a pretty interesting story. And then D Gods, kind of another risky falling knife. Feel like they have to bottom out, and got to 1.25. 1 ETH could be possible, um, and I think they got to find themselves some form of catalyst to get some momentum back. But a little bit off that short term kind of free fall, and a bit of a level off here. So we'll see how things play out on D Gods. Pause there. Any questions, thoughts in regards to any specific ETH collections, etc.? worries. So I uh, I had cycled in some liquidity into ordinals. Made a move into ordinals a couple weeks ago, which really kind of tapped a bit of the local tops of ordinals. We've seen some liquidity move out of the main collections across the board, um, which if we look at, let's see here, market cap, maybe the best way to look at it. Node bunks had quite a significant pullback down to about what 0.45, and they kind of drive, I think, a lot of the market overall as being kind of the primary collection over on Ordinals. So as they had this pullback from a pretty substantial run up, Bitcoin was in all time highs. So you're looking at Bitcoin in general and saying, okay, Bitcoin is a potential bet for a real strong move above all time high. And I'm sure some people would have cycled out into just Bitcoin. So that pullback happened a good 50, 60%, even more in some collections. Looked at ordinals and said, okay, there's 4 or 5 kind of main collections: node monks, OMB, puppets, cats, and then my bet was down on Nat Cats. I basically nearly bottom sold Nat Cats. Decided I wanted to take some ordinal risk off and park it back into Bitcoin, and so I sold. Took a reasonable loss on ordinals, and then yeah, 12 hours after I sold, uh, the bottom came in finally on ordinals, and there was a good 50%, not almost 50% run up. They've since retraced again, but ordinals got this kind of big flow of activity. I think a lot in part due to um, ruins overall, bringing some liquidity into the ordinal market. And we also got past this OMB mint, where they introduced the orange eyes and collection size increase. And I think there's a lot of trading activity towards that. So really played that quite poorly. But overall, I'm still good. I'm happy with just kind of parking in something a little bit more stable for the time being, as I kind of watch how things are cycling through. Like I said, meme coins aren't my flavor overall, though I think there are opportunities there. It has to be a much smaller portion to make those kind of bets. And overall, if everything's going really strong in crypto, I think you place a good portion into something that's a little bit more stable, and then cycle down from there, depending on risk tolerance. And right now, for me, my risk tolerance is straight into Bitcoin. So that's where we sit and watch that as things play out over the next while, and decide from there. So that's where that is at. We'll pause here for a bit. If there's any questions, thoughts, comments, wouldn't mind a bit of a discussion on things. Yeah. And then on DGens, we can see uh, kind of the most active collections across the board in terms of volume. A lot of that is Bitcoin leading the way. Of course, apes always up in there, penguins, and that's kind of the general extent of it. So last little bit, we've seen some really good success in Solana as a chain. This has kind of been driven by a bit of uh, FTX holdings that had existed, and I think kind of some uncertainty regarding sell pressure from FTX holdings, and I think some of those have been picked up, and as a result, Solana has moved. Of course, Solana is getting such activity and attention from all the meme activity going on it, and overall has been a pretty effective chain here this cycle, and it's really got a lot of pretty strong price predictions over this cycle. 1,000, 2,000 even, but it's just really been one of the stronger performers here over the most recent bit. And I think cost wise for transactions, speed, etc. Makes Solana pretty attractive across the board for meme coins, NFTs, etc. And so that's going to still be a narrative to watch here in the next while, as it could be a bit of a Solana summer as we trade meme coins, etc. So we'll be really curious to see how that plays into ETH NFTs and cross section of ordinals and ordinal success. Like there's three kind of really key drivers right now, and all of that, like I said, probably last week is I think the concern is it fragments that attention across multiple avenues, and user base and trading base across these chains isn't particularly large, and if we're fragmented, that makes things even harder in terms of liquidity, etc. It's an interesting narrative to watch, but you can go back and look into a collection. I don't know if mutants are the best drivers as a 20K collection, but you can look at it and say a lot of these collections can be pretty thin, even though price floors are moving down. It's always the um, panicked few versus the mass majority that are driving prices down. Of course, a lot of people will not list in this kind of scenario, but as soon as movement happens, then you can kind of see some listing in. So if you look at Azuki, floors 3.8, and then we're looking at what 5, 10, 13 to 4 ETH. So that's a pretty quick move. And then of course 4 ETH you'd think would be a bit thicker, but really it's not. So that's 15, 20, 23 sales, and you're up to 4.2, so 0.4, so well over like about a 12% move on 20 sales of Azuki. So these floors are still fairly thin, and it's just kind of the natural behavior of a few wanting to move out, but there's always that looming point of farmers and whether or not they drop and put a lot of pressure on the floor. There are a couple of interesting mints going on here on the art side of things. So we have Bitmon, which is a Bitcoin mint that is, I think, I'm not sure if this is, I think this is Eastern time, so I think it's happened now and started minting 150 pieces by Daily Cree. So that's an interesting one. This would have been on Magic Eden, so might actually see that happening here. If I can get back to where I want to be. There we go. Okay, so I think that's starting here in 15. Yeah, so this one's about to start. And then we also have OSF Professional Degen, which is happening on ETH through Magic Eden. Um, Interesting little one to watch, but otherwise pretty quiet. Only one's Bitcoin collection is coming out in a few days here as well. Art looks really good, but it's only 3,333 supply. Lower supply makes it a little harder to catch attention, but that one could be kind of interesting for activity. I think 0.04 range maybe on the higher side for it, depending on how that looks. And then yeah, that's kind of the main ones that are coming up overall. Nothing super significant. I think the most significant latest one is this Runestone, which was dropped to many Bitcoin holders or ordinal holders if you had a certain amount of collections and ordinals held. and then pretty at one point I think it was 0.04, so a pretty good run up there on Runestone, but bringing in some decent liquidity to ordinals. Mochaverse in a bit of a downtrend here, and there's not a lot to signify a bounce yet. So they're still trending downward here. Really, any support that we're looking at is probably at this 2 ETH range. They're at 3 right now, so a bit more downside that could exist. There's some support in 2.5 ETH range. Curious to see how Persona does on the reveal, etc. Um, Trading at back to here 0.3, which is on the lower end. I think they've gotten as low as about 0.25 range. Um, Pretty good consolidation here at this 0.27. I think it's going to be a likely post reveal dip, and then we'll see how the dart plays out to where it moves. Um, it's it's interesting. It's tough with kind of the quietness across ETH NFTs to where they go. I think if they can time this right and there's a bit of a ETH bounce around reveal, then that could work out well. But yeah, that's about it. A little bit quieter. Um, it's a bit of a wait and see over the next couple days. Um, Ordinals had a nice rebound here, but probably again a bit of a wait before there's some more momentum. Seems like the weekends have been where Ordinals have had some energy. So watch that going into next weekend. If there's a bit of a move back, Ordinals could be an interesting move next weekend if that's something that you're interested in. And yeah, stay safe in throwing ETH around to random wallets. I think it's super risky. You see those massive wins that are out there, and it's so tempting. But it all depends on what your risk tolerance is, and only kind of bet and give up what you're willing to lose outright. Because I think that's a reasonable potential when we're kind of tossing that at random memes. Um, Otherwise, I'd be looking at some of the more established ones and chasing small gains as still being large wins coming out of a bear market. So that's where I stand there. I'll get this video posted up for those that couldn't make it, but otherwise, look forward to a Thursday space. I'll post some TA analysis here from this session. I think there's a lot of really interesting charts that come across Parsec, especially with these primary collections, where I think the next few days is really a fun kind of pivotal moment across the collections and looking to see a bounce with that. If not, then we'll see where things can lead from there. But I think looking at these trends across the board, that I think it's quite fair to expect a good move with that. So um, pretty good to see. So that is it. Appreciate you guys for joining in, and yeah, we'll do it again soon. and go from there.